If your students are struggling to learn, then in spite of your best efforts, they're not getting something that they need. I'm going to show you 5 prompts that you can use to help you figure out what is their specific barrier to learning and how do we get them the support that they need to learn. Here's your key takeaway. First, you have to know what's the barrier to learning. We can't design an appropriate support. We can't get AI to give us an appropriate support until we figure out what students' barriers are to learning. And as it turns out, AI can actually help us with that part of the process too. Here's our first prompt. So let's take a look here. So I've got a little description of my classroom and the topic and the subject, even the content standard. Then I'm saying that there are 3 different types of students. We got our below grade level, we've got our ELL students, and we even have some advanced learners who maybe are checking out. So we're going to ask the AI to say, given this topic and given this information about the students, what could those barriers possibly be? And when I turn that over to AI, I get some pretty in-depth and revealing information. You are going to put in specifics about your kids and topics, and then run this prompt and say, what are the possibilities? So for each of those 3 groups now, I've got a set of likely key learning barriers, and I'm going to think about my observations, and I'm going to look at my data, and I'm just going to look at what the work is that the kids are doing in their formative assessments and say, okay, which of these seem to be the most likely barrier to learning? And there may be some in there that you haven't yet thought of. So here we've got 5, and we've got this is our below grade level students here, and some potential instructional supports, but we're going to come back to that in just a moment. So we go through this with each group. There's our ELL students, likely learning barriers that I'm going to reflect on, and then for our advanced learners too, because oftentimes they're not getting what they need either. All right, so that's the first part, to try to hone in and figure out what could those barriers be. But then we need to do something with them. So let's take a look at our second prompt here. The second prompt is going to be the base. So this, when I say the base activity, this is what we're going to provide to the average students in the classroom. This is our grade level student here, and then we're going to create a base activity for that population, and then add some modifications for our other populations. So let's go ahead and just get this one in there first, because we'll use this one to create the supports for other student groups. So we've got our fraction activity, 5th grade, on grade level, that's important here, standards, and then some things about what the activity should look like. All right, let's take a quick look at what AI gives us for that. All right, scooting on down just a bit here. All right, so we've got our activity here, our fractional word problem activity. This is the baseline, and now we're going to do some supports and some modifications from this starting point here. So we've got our activity. I'm just going to zip past it because that's not really the point that we're getting to here. So pop, 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 pop. Actually, some of those look pretty fun. Okay. Now, let's take a look at our first subpopulation and the potential supports for that group. So let's look at our ELL students, our English language learners. So we've got the activity again, and I'm just going to tell ChatGPT, hey, in reference to the grade level activity, do these modifications. All right. So modify the grade level activity. And when we thought about what the barriers were and some of the things that the kids might need, that's getting dropped into here. We need visual supports. We need some sentence frames. We need some simplified directions, but make sure we stick to the content standard. So take the base. These are what we think are some barriers and strategies for overcoming the barriers. And let's see what we get for these particular students. What kind of a support can we give them? And here we go. For our ELL students, simplified directions, visual keys, and actually this is pretty good, sentence frames. So we've drawn from those potential supports up above, and now we are embedding them within this particular prompt here. So that is ELL students. But let's take a look at it. Let's take a look at another group. And frankly, when you think about your students and their challenges, their barriers, and possible supports, you can modify this for pretty much any subgroup. Start with your base and then say, all right, for this group, here are the types of supports that we want to give them. So let's recreate the activity to include those supports. All right, so that was our ELL. What are we looking at next? All right, for our below grade level students who are having a hard time with the concepts in this particular case, we've got our activity, and then what do we want to do for them? Okay, we are going to include clear directions, keep concise, modify it to create a scaffolded version for students below. And thinking back to our supports that we identified, we want to make sure it includes step-by-step, one worked example, and a gradual release to independence. And we turn that over to AI. And I'll mention this just as I'm scrolling here. Creating all of these different types of activities and modifications of activities oftentimes just doesn't happen in a classroom because you just don't have time to do it, right? But when we turn it over to AI, all we have to do is write the prompt and AI will help us to create the support. Okay, so where are we? We are looking at scaffold. We've got our directions step by step. Very nice. Worked examples to demonstrate the process. We've got our guided practice for the students. We have our independent practice and so forth. And now we've got something which is appropriate, an appropriate support to help these particular students overcome their barriers to learning. So very, very good stuff. And let's take one more here. Let's just say we already know ahead of time we've got different groups in our classrooms. Can we somehow combine it together into our initial prompt? Well, we can. So we're going to start fresh. We need 3 versions. Fraction activity, 5th grade, there's our standard again. And we can incorporate all of those into a single prompt. So we need something for our below grade level kids. We need an on-level version, we need some enrichment, and whatever else you've got, you can include that student group here, bring in the likely barriers and the supports to overcome that barrier, drop it in your prompt, and then any other additions that you need. So I know this is a lot of text on the screen right now. I am going to drop these, I'll drop a link to the prompts down in the comments below, and I'll pin it so you can find it easily. So if you want these specific prompts, pop over there. I will also note that we do have a full prompt pack, 8 prompts, not including these, but 8 new prompts with base prompts, modifications, adjustments, and examples. So if you want a copy of that, drop a comment down below and just say, I would like the prompt pack, and I'll make sure that you get a copy of it. So drop that in the comments if you want the full prompt pack, and I'll make sure that you get it. Okay, so when we take this full prompt here, turn it over to AI, we're going to get something which right from the starting gate is going to give us instructions and supports for each of the subgroups in our classrooms. And the point at the end of the day, we've got kids that have learning barriers. We identify the barriers. We identify the supports to overcome them. And then we turn it over to AI to say, this is what I need so my kids over here will be able to learn. I hope you found this useful. Take care.